playground dispute, a child's anger. How young is too young to kill? Too young to kill, Mary Bell. She smiled like a child, but spoke like a storm, with hands too small yet perfectly formed. A cradle of charm, a spark in her eyes, but behind that stare, a child's demise. How young is too young to kill? This is the story of Mary Bell, a girl born into violence, shaped by trauma and feared by a nation. Born May 26, 1957, in Newcastle upon Tyne, England, Mary Bell grew up in Scotswood, a working-class neighborhood marked by hardship. Her childhood was a nightmare. Her mother, Betty Bell, was a sex worker with alleged Munchausen syndrome by proxy. She allegedly forced overdoses and may have tried to kill Mary more than once. Her father figure was inconsistent. Her home, a storm of abuse and neglect. By age 5, Mary was already different, detached, emotionless, dangerous. She was known for choking other children. No remorse, no explanation. Then came May 25, 1968, just one day before her 11th birthday. 4-year-old Martin Brown was found dead in an abandoned house. No blood, no bruises, just stillness. She is believed to have committed this crime alone. 3 children discovered Brown's body at approximately 3:30 p.m. He was lying on his back with his arms stretched above his head. Aside from specks of blood and foam around his mouth, no signs of violence were visible upon his body. A local workman named John Hall soon arrived on the scene. He attempted to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation, known as CPR to us, but to no avail. As Hall attempted CPR, Mary Bell and Norma Bell appeared at the doorway to the bedroom. Both were quickly shooed out of the house. The two knocked on the door of Martin's aunt, Rita Finley, and informed her, "One of your sister's sons has just had an accident. We think it's Martin, but we can't tell because there's blood all over him." The death was ruled an accident. But something was wrong. Mary later returned to the scene. She left graffiti. One note read, "I murder so that I may come back." 2 days later, on the 29th of May, shortly before the funeral of Martin Brown, in a brazen game of dare, both girls called upon the house of his mother, June, asking to see her son. When June Brown replied that they could not see her son because he was deceased, Mary replied, "Oh, I know he's dead. I want to see him in his coffin." What an odd request from an innocent little girl. People began to speculate that Mary was involved, but it was brushed off. Who would believe it? She was just a little girl. Weeks later, she and her friend Norma Bell vandalized a nursery school, leaving more disturbing notes about murder. Mary Setter clearly showed no remorse, maybe even eager to harm once again. Then, on July 31st, Brian Howe disappeared. 3 years old, last seen with no other than Mary Bell. The coroner determined that Brian had died from asphyxiation and had likely been deceased for several hours before his body was found. The evidence suggested the killer had used minimal force, indicating the perpetrator was likely another child. Additional injuries included shallow punctures to his legs, parts of his hair cut off, and markings etched into his abdomen, one resembling the letter M. His clothing had also been disturbed in a way that suggested an intentional act of cruelty, though full details were withheld to protect the dignity of the victim. The questions started to mount. The coincidences couldn't be ignored. Why were Mary and Norma always so close to the crime scenes? Maybe they saw who did it? They are so young, no way they would or could harm a baby. No matter the thought or questions, the pair could no longer be ignored. Authorities finally picked up Mary and Norma for questioning. Norma seemed excitable, whereas Mary was markedly more observant and taciturn. Norma seemed to think this was all a game, while Mary watched in pure amusement. Both girls initially agreed to play with Brian earlier in the day, but denied seeing him after lunch on the day of his death. Mary asked police, "Did he have any scissors with him?" Mary would continue to say that she remembered seeing an 8-year-old local boy playing with Brian on the afternoon of July 31st, and that she had also seen him hitting the child. Furthermore, she stated she also remembered that the boy had been covered in grass and weeds as if he had been rolling in a field, and that he had in his possession a small pair of scissors. Mary then expounded, "I saw him trying to cut a cat's tail off with the scissors, but there was something wrong with him. One leg was broken or bent," a detail only the authorities knew. In addition, the local boy she named was quickly questioned and was discovered to have been at Newcastle International Airport on the afternoon of July 31st, with numerous witnesses able to corroborate his parents' claims. The police quickly knew the pair was involved in the early demise of Brian. Norma couldn't handle the pressure. The fun was over, and she wasn't going down for crimes she witnessed but did not commit. Norma broke. She confessed it was Mary.
"She was trying to teach me how to hurt people like she did, but I didn't do it!"
Norma, under the guidance of her parents, described in detail what Mary did to Brian, including the location and how the crime was committed. Mary was questioned again at her home, resulting in Mary becoming defensive and accusing law enforcement of trying to brainwash her. Mary would yell, "I will get a lawyer to get me out of this." Brian Howe was buried in a local cemetery on August 7, 1968, in a ceremony attended by over 200 people. According to DCI Dobson, who had planned to arrest both girls later that day, Mary Bell stood outside the Howe household as the child's coffin was brought from the home at the beginning of the funeral procession. Dobson later stated, "She stood there, laughing and rubbing her hands. I thought, my God, I've got to bring her in. She'll do another one." Both girls were formally charged with the murder of Brian Howe at 8 p.m. that evening. In response to this charge, Mary replied, "That's all right by me, but will I still get a birthday party?" While Norma burst into tears, simply proclaiming, "I'll pay you back for this." Mary quickly decided that she didn't like being detained and decided to place the blame on her friend Norma. Mary had insisted that Norma was the mastermind and had committed all the crimes alone, with Mary standing watch. Before the trial began, both girls were given psychological evaluations, concluding that Norma was intellectually delayed and a submissive character who easily displayed emotion, whereas Mary was a bright yet cunning character, prone to sudden mood swings. Occasionally, Mary was willing to talk, although she rapidly became sullen, introspective, and defensive in nature. Psychologists called her serious, intelligent, manipulative, with psychopathic traits. Mary was diagnosed with psychopathic personality disorder. Norma Bell, no relation to Mary, wasn't just a bystander in this dark tale. She was older than Mary by over a year, and though often described as simple or easily led, she played an unsettling role. Some witnesses recalled Norma smiling during police interviews. Others said she seemed eager to be part of the attention. Norma was present at both crime scenes. She watched, she giggled, she misled adults and police. During the first murder, she helped Mary misdirect Martin Brown's family, calmly knocking on the door to say a child, possibly Martin, was hurt. Her words were soft but chilling. When questioned, she wept and played the victim. But her stories didn't match. She shifted blame. Then later, under pressure, she pointed the finger at Mary, but conveniently left out her own actions until confronted. Was Norma just following Mary's lead, or was she an opportunist? In court, the psychologist portrayed Norma as intellectually limited, submissive, and emotionally reactive. But her behavior contradicted that innocence. Norma Bell was different. She giggled at crime scenes, smiled during interviews, even whispered to classmates about the murders as if they were ghost stories she had lived through. Some said she was just along for the ride. Others believed she enjoyed the game too much. But did Norma truly understand what she was part of? Was she a manipulated follower, or a quiet instigator hiding behind wide eyes and nervous laughter? In court, psychologists described her as intellectually limited, submissive, emotionally reactive. But her actions, they told a different story. And when the trial began in December 1968 at Newcastle Assizes, the contrast was stark. Mary sat still, quiet, unnerved. Norma? She fidgeted, whispered, watched the room like a spectator at a play, one she thought she wouldn't have to star in. The trial lasted 9 tense days. When the verdicts were finally read, the room held its breath. The jury had deliberated for 3 hours and 25 minutes. Mary Bell, guilty of manslaughter by diminished responsibility. She was just 11 years old. Norma Bell, acquitted. No charges, no consequences. And how did she react? She clapped her hands and laughed, like she'd just won a game. Mary cried. Her mother wept. But Norma smiled and walked free. To this day, one question lingers. Was Norma an unwilling accomplice, or did she simply get away with murder? Mary's grandmother also wept. They never thought she would be charged. She was just a child. She was sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, a sentence with no set release date. Mary spent 12 years in various institutions. She rarely spoke of the murders. She read, she wrote poetry, but she never said why. In 1980, she was released at 23. Netta's given a new identity. She later had a daughter who didn't know her past until it was exposed. In 2009, courts granted Mary Bell lifelong anonymity, a legal precedent now known as the Mary Bell Order. To this day, she's still alive, still hidden, still protected. Was she a victim or a monster? Was Mary Bell born bad or broken by the world around her? Mary Bell, age 11, killed 2 children and smiled through it all. Mary now lives as a free woman, identity unknown. She was too young to kill. Next episode, a school shooting that rocked the nation. A 6-year-old boy, a stolen gun, and a single fatal shot. Episode 3. Diedrich Owens. Too Young to Kill, a series that dives into the haunting, real-life stories of the world's youngest perpetrators.